Hey everyone, Stevie Taylor here, and welcome to episode 50 of the Gig Life podcast. Yeah, crowd goes well. Yeah, okay, sorry about that. Wicked. So I want to personally thank all of my guests so far who have been on the show, who have given up their time, shared their lives and stories with me, and allowed me to share those stories with you. I also want to thank you. I've said this before, if it wasn't for you, if you didn't download and listen to the episodes, if you didn't keep coming back, we wouldn't be here having this conversation today, So thank you so much for that. As well as continuing to bring you all these one-on-one episodes, stories, career snapshots, I have a bunch of other plans for the podcast this year, and that includes some more roundtable episodes. I'm also starting the Gig Life podcast Spotlight series, and that's where me and some friends sit down and we talk about musicians, artists, etc. that have inspired us, influenced us, and perhaps have inspired you also. So we'll go into detail about them, listen and analyse their music, share our memories. Should be very informative and a lot of fun. So looking forward to that. So follow along to the Gig Life podcast social media stuff and the website, that kind of thing, to find out when that stuff's going to happen. So anyways, again, thank you. It's on with the show. Here's episode 50. It's a cracker. It's Ben Rodgers. My guest today is bass player, guitarist, songwriter, producer and audio engineer Ben Rodgers. Jimmy Barnes, Chisel, Mahalia Barnes and the Soulmates, Bonamassa, Jade, MacRae, Reece, Mastin, Diesel and Karen Lee Andrews are just a few of the artists Ben has worked with so far in his career. So we've been trying for a while to get together for this podcast episode, but Ben's a very busy man. He's either out on the road touring with Jimmy Barnes, a stay-at-home dad while his wife Mahalia Barnes tours the world with Bonamassa, or he's in the recording studio producing and engineering records, which brought us to this night. So Ben asked me to meet him at a recording studio in Sydney as he was in town for a couple of weeks working on a session. So I get there, I ring the buzzer, Ben meets me at the door and escorts me into this big dining area, and standing there at the kitchen is Jimmy and Jane Barnes. So a little starstruck, I said hello to them, and then Ben takes me through to the recording studio with all the guitars laying around, beautiful drum kit set up there, keyboards and microphones set up in the control room. Clearly there's something big going on here. So then Ben tells me he's here working with Chisel. They're currently writing new material and Ben is engineering the session, so that's really exciting stuff. And I was a little scared to touch anything, to be honest. So, let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce to you the laid-back, the positive, the grateful, the multi-talented Ben Rodgers. Cheers. All right, I think we're rolling. Ben Rodgers, welcome to episode 50 of the Gig Life podcast. Woo!
Half century.
Yeah, man. I made it. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. We finally hooked this up.
Yes.
We're at Jimmy Barnes' recording studio.
Yep.
And you are currently engineering some Cold Chisel demos.
Yes, their boys are writing. I'm very privileged to be here doing it because they're, as you know, one of the most incredible bands Australia has ever produced. And to be in here amongst them as they're being creative is one of the coolest artistic things I've been involved in to be fair. And I've had a lot of great opportunities, so it's really good.
Yeah, it's exciting, man. It's fantastic setup.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's massive. Now, you were living in Sydney for a while, but you're not living here anymore, are you?
No, I originally I moved around a lot as a kid because my parents were in the military. And then I settled in Canberra and went to uni there, and then moved up to Sydney about, I'm old, so what, 10, more than 10 now, like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And then just recently, because I got kids now and my wife, Mahalia, tours a lot, so we just thought we'd get out of the big smoke and moved into the Southern Highlands. And it's beautiful down there. I love it.
Yep. And for the people that don't know, Ben's wife, Mahalia, is the daughter of Jimmy Barnes.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, the eldest daughter. Yeah.
The eldest daughter. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so you're in the Southern Highlands?
Yeah,
Must be pretty cold this time of year, eh?
It sure is. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember how, like, when I used to live in Canberra.
Oh yeah, that's.
I used to like go to university and I would not wear shoes all year round. Like when I first met Mahalia and came to Sydney and was doing gigs, I only had one pair of shoes, and so I would always do gigs like barefoot. You know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like Delta Goodrum, you know, me and Delta. Yeah, because I didn't own any shoes, like, because I was just like, was broke, and I think I slept in the front room of a share house in Surrey Hills on a fold-out mattress with like those like half-inch thick mattresses, because I was like, man, I don't care about anything except the music, man. You know, I was like one of those real die-hard, you know, music or nothing. Everything I own needs to fit in my like little Ford sedan, and that's it. So,
oh man,
yeah. Mahalia was shocked, needless to say, when she first met me. She's
right.
like, "You sleep there?"
Oh, far out. So when did you guys meet?
Oh man, would have been around late 2007, 2008, I think, because I was working with Jade MacRae. Mm-hmm. So I'd moved to Sydney. Because Darren Percival, this incredible singer, brought me up, basically just said, hey, man, you should come and work in Sydney. And I was like, oh, yeah, man, I'd love to, thinking, you know, he's just saying that. And then like a week later he called and goes, so, yeah, I've got this gig and I need you to be there. And Dave Symes is playing bass, but I told him that you're going to get up for a few tunes. And I was like, oh, my God. So we went up, had a play, and the other guys in the band were like, yeah, this is cool, this kid's all right. So then I started coming up, doing gigs with him, and Jade MacRae came to a gig and then asked if I wanted to join her band. And so then I started doing that, and then Mahalia just came and sang BVs on a gig. And I met her briefly, and, you know, we did the gig and then she split. And then we did a support for James Brown, which was incredible, at the State Theatre. I think it was the last...
I interviewed Jade a while back. She told me about that gig.
Yeah, and for all of us, it was just like, we're like, oh my goodness. And we're doing the sound check, and everyone's a bit nervy and on edge, and the drummer that was playing was just like, you know, he was nervous and like, oh no, this sound is terrible, and you know, this monitoring sucks, and like,
is this the James?
Not James. No, this
Brown?
is in Jade's band.
Oh.
It's in Jade's band. So and like we're all like, oh man, you shouldn't say that. You shouldn't say that. And Mahalia just was like, shut up, you idiot. Like, and I was like, man, I like this girl. And that was the first moment that I was like, yeah, I'd like to get to know this girl. She's got spunk, you know, like. And so that's what I always say. The moment I knew I liked her was when she just takes no shit. Takes no shit. Yeah, 100%. And I love that. And it's, you know, it's one of the greatest things, you know. But yeah, so that was, man, yeah. 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
11 years ago, that James Brown gig or something.
Yeah, right. Can I ask how old you are?
I am 35.
Man, you're young.
I feel old. No. I got kids. I feel old.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So now let's talk about your musical upbringing in Canberra.
Yeah. Well, I guess, firstly, my dad's a musician. He's a guitarist and a singer, and so... He played in bands when he was young, and then when I was born, he basically joined the Air Force. because he was like, I got to get a real job for my family and be an upstanding citizen and blah, blah, blah. But he always played music. So growing up, there was always guitars in the house and you know, he's always singing and he'd take me to his band rehearsals on the weekends and stuff like that. And I loved it. And then one day I was like, man, I think I want to play the guitar, you know? Like, so I'd steal his guitar from under the bed because he had this nice Telecaster that he'd keep under the bed. And he'd be out at work and I'd get home from school and I'd pull it out and just play it upside down. Like I was just left-handed, so I'd play his right-handed guitars upside down. Like, and I'm like, yeah, like Jimi Hendrix, man, this is awesome.
Sorry, do you still play that way?
No,
okay.
no.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, no, I did. When I first started, I played, because I couldn't afford left-handed instruments,
right.
So I played upside-down bass for the first year or two in bands and stuff. But yeah, I'd steal my old man's guitar, and then he was like, man, my strings are so rusty all the time. What is going on? And he worked out that I was, you know, stealing his guitar. So he bought me this crappy little nylon thing, and I was just obsessed with it. And then he bought me an electric guitar, and I can't remember how old I was, but I was up to learning bar chords, right? And it hurt my fingers too much, so I just quit. And he's never let me forget it. Like, he's like, I sold this beautiful Kayari nylon string guitar to get you an Ibanez electric, and then you just stopped playing because it hurt your fingers. And so I stopped for a few years, and then I think I would have been we were living in like Newcastle or something, and I think I didn't fit in at the school because at the high school it was like everybody surfed, right? They were all like bleached hair, surfy guys. I was like super skinny, super pale, just like a big, you know, would go home and just listen to like Santana records, and all my friends were like, hey, what about Korn? And I was like, yeah, no, but Santana, like Abraxas album on vinyl is great. And they're like, what? And so I mowed lawns for about 3 months, you know, the old days when you get like $5 a lawn. And mowed enough lawns till I could get like a shitty Yamaha Pacifica guitar. And then from then I just never stopped playing.
It just reminds me of a classic meme. Well, I don't know if it's a classic yet, but I saw a meme, I don't know if it was Instagram or something today, the GoFundMe of the old days. Kid pushing a lawnmower.
Oh, man. That's 100%.
Exactly right,
so true.
Yeah.
And you just get ripped off so bad. Yeah, $5. It's an acre, but, you know, I'll give you $5.
That's it.
Like,
this kid was struggling too. The grass is really long and, you know, he's only 2 foot tall, you know.
Yeah, and that's what I did. And I got this guitar, and I love playing it. And I would just play in the garage, and I had a mate that I played with, and blah, 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 and we'd do a little bit of stuff, and my cousin played guitar. And then we moved back to Canberra from Newcastle, and my dad could tell that I was really getting into the guitar thing, but he was trying to be, because I'd quit last time, so he was playing it cool. And so him and his mate, this guy David Buckmaster, who was the bass player in my dad's band, would go, hey, we'll give you you want to do the gig? And I was like, oh, man, you want me to play on the gig? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like 12, I think. And they're like, yeah, we'll let you play like 1 or 2 songs, you know, maybe like LaGrange by ZZ Top or something. And I was like, oh, my God, this is awesome. And like, yeah, and we'll pay you $10. And I'm like, great. And they're like, but you got to help set up the PA. And it was like those old school fridge PAs, like, and I'm like 12, like lugging it on the trolley, and I was like, wow, this is the best. I'm really doing it. I'm living the dream. And so I started there, and just ended up playing with my dad. And then a guy would come to a gig and say, oh, hey, how old's your son? You know, and I think I was like 15, and I started playing in like covers bands around Canberra, doing like disco and funk. I joined some band called Fizzy Pop when I was about 15, and I was like, no joke, if there's photos it'd be horribly embarrassing, but we used to go and do gigs in like, I had mustard flares and like a full paisley body shirt, and the whole band would get full kitted out 70s style and do like, you know, Car Wash and all those kind of like really naff disco songs. But for me as a young guitarist, because I was playing guitar back then, it was just so great to play all that like Nile Rodgers chic stuff, and you know, I was real lucky. I went from playing like rock covers with my dad to playing like funk, like disco stuff. So in hindsight, apart from the outfits, you know, it was a great place to get my butt kicked learning like real killer rhythm parts.
Yeah.
And then after that, in college, I was like, you know how you go have those career advisors, you know? And so, yeah, I was like, you know, a teenager. So I was like, after wanting to just chase girls pretty much and get drunk. And so I went to my career advisor and they're like, so Ben, you know, you could do really, if you put your mind to it, you could really do well in year 12. And I was like, yeah, you know, but I like playing guitar and I'm doing gigs and they go, oh, well, if you want to apply for the university at the ANU in Canberra, you can do the jazz course and you don't need year 12. You can just finish after year 11, which is the worst thing you can say. So I was like, sweet, all right, cool. I'm not turning up to any more classes for year 12. So basically I just bailed on school, went home and practiced like, you know, 5-6 hours a day on guitar and bass.
Yep.
Because at that point, I ended up playing bass, upside down bass, in a ska punk band because my mate, who had been the bass player in our band, got into a university course for guitar. And so I was like, oh, you should play guitar in the band and I'll play bass, you know, so we flipped over. And then I went and did the auditions. I bought a left-handed bass just in time for the auditions and did it and didn't get in on guitar, but they're like, yeah, do you want to come to uni for bass? And I was like, sure. So then I was like a bass player.
Right. So what's the audition?
I think back in, if I remember, you had to play. You went and played at the ANU. You would play 2 pieces. I think you had to play a jazz standard because it was for a jazz course.
Did you choose? You get to choose the song?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't. I think I did something like real lame, like Summertime, you know, or something like that. And I can't remember what. Maybe I just played an original as well. And then you have to sight read. And then they'll ask you a few theory questions, which I totally sucked at because I was completely self-taught up to that point. But, yeah, luckily they let me in because I don't know what my life would have been like if they said no.
Right.
So, yeah, I ended up going to uni studying jazz bass.
Right. How long was that for?
That was, I think the course is 4 years and I did 3.5 because I was studying. I got 3.5 years through and that's when I'd met Darren Percival. And so I was driving up to Sydney minimum 2, maybe 3 times a week from Canberra to Sydney. So I'd drive up on a Thursday, do a gig, finish at midnight, get in the car, drive back, do uni for the day, get in the car, drive up, do a gig on Friday night, drive back, either have a gig in Canberra on the Saturday or in Sydney. And then, so I was doing this crazy commute in an old, like, early 80s Holden Gemini that had rust all, you know what I mean? It was like, when you think about it now, you're like, damn, and like the whole car was full of like, me and the drummer would do it because this young drummer, we were both doing all these gigs and I said to my teacher, Eric Ajay, who's just this incredible bass player that's played with like Chaka Khan, Freddie Hubbard, you know, all his session stuff in LA, and he's just the sweetest guy, incredible bass player. And I said, look, man, I'm really worried. Like, I'm doing this commute and I've got all these gigs, you know, and it's great. I'm working in Sydney. I'm doing all this stuff, you know. And he's like, oh, man, you know, well, what do you want to do? And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, well, do you want to play music or, you know, do you want to teach music or what's your end goal? And I was like, man, I just want to play. Like, I want to play in bands. I want to make art. I want to go and tour. And he just looked at me and he goes, well, then why are you still in my office? And so I just left uni. I never finished.
Right.
Basically, he said that to me and I went, okay. So I just like basically packed up, sold a bunch of my gear to get some money and moved up to Sydney.
Are you able to ever go back and finish?
If anyone from the ANU is listening, please let me know because I'd love to. It'd be great. I've done so much. I'm still paying the HECS debt. So, you know, I would love to finish it, but
yeah, so close.
I was so close, but it's hard because music is, music. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, well, I guess you're in it and you're doing it.
That's what I mean.
And what's the gain?
Yeah, well, look, it's always nice to have a qualification that says, hey, you've studied music to this point. But for me, I'm living my dream.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, I never thought growing up that I'd get to go on tour and play it, studying jazz. Like, I never thought I'd play a gig at Carnegie Hall. Yeah. Like, it never crossed my mind. Like, I never thought I'd play anywhere outside of Australia, I never thought I'd play at most of the venues I have played in Australia, My dream was just, as a kid, was like, man, maybe I could work every Friday and Saturday doing gigs and then maybe get a job at a music store and sell guitars and, man, I'd be a musician. You know what I mean? Like, I had my dreams, but like, it's one of those things where when they come true, you're just like, oh, man, I can't believe it. I'm really, and that's the thing. I always say, like, I'm the luckiest person in the world. I get to, from 15 or 16, all I have done is be a musician. I haven't worked a normal job since then. And to do that as a musician, like, I absolutely know how lucky I am to have that opportunity, because I've seen so many people who I think are absolutely incredible, talented musicians, artists, like, through whatever circumstance, they haven't had that same luck or opportunity. So, I'm truly blessed, to be still here doing it now at 35, from 15. So it's 20 years of being just a straight up musician, which is awesome,
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really great.
Okay, so you've packed the car up, you're moving to Sydney.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and so, basically I moved up, and where did I stay first? I think I just ended up crashing on a couch of my friends. My friends had a share house in Bondi Junction. Daniel Mifsud, who's a incredible singer and one of my best mates, and he was living with this guy Mark Palmer, who's in a band called the Hipstones, who they live in New York, and I think they work with like Weedus and stuff now.
Right.
And so I'd crash on their couch, and then I ended up playing with both of them, like, and so we became really close. And then I think we all found, I think it was Dan Mifsud who was like looking through like the Wentworth Courier or something like that. We call it the Book of Dreams, because it's like all those houses you could never afford and like living in the eastern suburbs, and like, we're like, damn. And he was like flipping through it. And then in the back, he just spotted like, it was like house for rent, $500 a week in Watson's Bay. And we're like, what? And so he calls this guy, and the guy's like, yeah, look, we're ripping down the house in 6 to 12 months. We're just waiting on approvals. And so we can't really rent it because like with an agreement like proper, because as soon as the council comes, we want to kick whoever it is out.
Yep.
And so we're all musicians. We're like, hey, we'll take it.
Man.
Woo! So basically the first house I moved into in Sydney looked out basically off the cliffs out to Sydney Harbour, and I was paying like $120 a week rent. And it was this old 70s like beach home looking. It was terrible, but that was what I thought Sydney was like. So that's yet another like, living the blessed life, is that I would sit up out of my fold-away bed in the morning and look out the window, and it's just like ocean views.
Wow, man.
And so I was like, man, Sydney's great. People are like, oh, it's really hard here. And I was like, man, it's beautiful. and so we lived in that house, which was great, with a whole bunch of musos. So we would jam all the time. We'd have people over for parties, and was playing lots of gigs. I started doing heaps of like gigs with those guys at like the Sheaf, Opera Bar, all those usual suspects, just playing 3-4 times a week, just loving it, playing bass at this stage. I was just a bass player then. So still working with Darren Percival, and then Jade MacRae called, so I started working with her. And then around that point was when I met Mahalia. And so just as we left that house, I started working with her. And then we moved. They tore the house down, which was sad.
What's there now?
Probably some incredible multi-million dollar.
Yeah. You could tell everyone you lived there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, man.
Hey, man.
And so I think then we moved to Surrey Hills. So we were living in Burke Street next to the Carrington pub, which is now a trendy pub, but back then it wasn't. And it was just doing gigs around town, like just really happy because it was, when you're young, you're just basically doing gigs, getting drunk, hanging out. But then, I started working more seriously with Jade and we were doing bigger shows. Mahalia asked me to join her band, started doing some shows with her. And then around that time, I think, when we were in Surrey Hills, I think because Christian Nattard, who I think he was on the bass player, who's one of my favourite bass players in the country, well, he's not. He doesn't live here anymore, but
Yeah.
He went to do something. I think he was on tour in America, or maybe one of the first times he split, and he recommended me to dep for Guy Sebastian's gig. So then I was like, oh man, shit, all right, I'm doing a proper big gig, because he had big singles out and stuff. I think it was what was the album? It's his kind of rocky album that he did with David Ryan Harris and stuff. So that's how I've met David Ryan Harris at that point. And so I started working with him, and that was with Therapy, who else? Rob Wolf, Therapy, it's so great to play with Therapy. What a drummer, what a guy. And so I started doing gigs like that, and so it kind of leveled up again for me. And then it's weird though, because I was at this point, I was doing so many gigs that I actually started to burn out a little bit.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it was around that time as well. I was doing stuff with him. I'd got called to do a bit of stuff with the Young Divas and stuff when they were a band before they all split and did their own stuff. And I was just working heaps to the point where I think Mahalia and I had started dating, and we would just hang out and I would just get back to the house and just be wrecked. And that was a real turning point for me, because that's where, as a musician, I kind of had to make that choice of, do I want to do gigs for money or do I want to do gigs for art, as a musician?
Right.
And so around that point was one of the first times Jimmy Mahalia's father, Jimmy Barnes, asked me to play with him. And I went along to see a gig and I was like, holy shit. I've never seen anything like this. You hear all the stories and blah, blah, blah. And he's the sweetest guy, but on stage, it just blew my mind, the intensity. And then when I got on stage and played a gig.
Of Jimmy or the band? The whole lot?
Just everything.
Okay.
Everything about it is and I was like, whoa, this is full on. And then when I got on the bandstand and was playing with him, just the sheer intensity and commitment and hard work, just what he puts into every single gig. Basically, I just made a choice in my mind and said, fuck, if this guy will have me in his band, I'll quit everything else because I want to learn how to have that much just integrity and commitment to doing a show at Reeves B Workers on a Wednesday night. You know what I mean? I'd never seen that intensity before. I've worked with incredible artists who are super talented. And it's not to say that they're not absolutely into what they're doing, but there was just something about his energy and the vibe on stage that just made me go man, teach me. You're twice my age and you're just wiping the floor with me every night. I'm wrecked and you're let's do another set. And I'm oh my God, just let me rest, And so at that point, I'd kind of blew off a lot of the gigs I was doing, which freaked me out because,
still got to make some coin, don't you?
Totally. And so that was a real big gamble, which, you know, there were times where it was hard because at that point Mahalia and I had moved in and she just bought a house and you know, boring music stuff, but financially it's real hard when you're trying to like, you know, start a life and like you want to have a home, you know, which is a dream, it's a Australian dream. And I remember there was like a lot of times where it was like 2-minute noodles every day vibes because we were like, oh man, how are we going to pay the mortgage? We don't have a gig this week because you just don't know. And that's because I wasn't quite in Jimmy's band yet or anything like that, but I'd made the choice that I was going to cut back. And it was a bit lean for a while there. But
did you start second guessing that decision to cut back?
Totally. Like,
were you having to hustle a little bit for some gigs?
Yeah, like that's happened a few times, like even kind of recently, like that period happened, and then I started working with Jimmy and with Mahalia as well. We did like I think her first album was around then, but at the beginning, like we were doing shows and she couldn't pay me because she wasn't getting enough money to pay her band even. So some of us would do gigs and she had a great friend in Melbourne who was a fashion designer. So she'd be like, Ben, look, I can't pay you, but if you come around to Ivan's, you know, fashion, you know, his shop, he said you can pick a jacket. Right. So we do these like tours where we do like 3 or 4 shows in Victoria and she's like, I can't pay you, but here, have a jacket. Yeah. Which, you know, I still have all of those jackets.
Yeah, cool.
Because they mean like more to me than cash, you know what I mean? Because it was that commitment to the art, like where you're like, you know. And so that was lean. Then we things got better. Then we had our first child, Ruby. And when she was young, things got real tight again, just because there was no gigs. And it's that thing when you start working solely with people and then say for whatever reason like they might go and do a side project, people just forget you're alive, you know,
right?
Like, which happens to a lot of musicians. Like you get a great gig and people just go, oh, he's out with that guy, you know what I mean? Which there's nothing bad about it. It's just one of the things. Like they go, oh, I just assumed you were out on tour
right, I understand.
And so it was getting real slim this one point where I was like calling all my old mates going, man, I'll teach. I'll like work at a store. Like, you know, it's like I got to pay the mortgage, you know, like. And that happened to be just before Mahalia did The Voice.
Okay.
And just as she was doing The Voice, I randomly was giving a guitar lesson to this guy, Marcus Catanzaro, and chatting to him going, oh, you know, what do you need the guitar lesson for? And he's like, oh, I do X Factor. And he goes, I'm in the band, like, but we mostly mime, but I play. And I was like, oh, cool. And he's like, you know, and I was like, oh, we might have vaguely known each other because he worked at Harbour Agency, a booking agency. And I was giving him a lesson and he was like, yeah, I might be playing with this guy that might win X Factor. I was like, oh, cool. You know, I didn't watch any TV shows like that. And then Gary Pinto, who's one of Australia's greatest singers, called me and goes, oh, man, I'm on X Factor. And I was like, oh, I met this Marcus guy. And he goes, oh, yeah, cool, blah, blah, blah. We're chatting. And he goes, would you be interested in playing with a X Factor person? And I was like, man, look, at this point, I'll jump out of a cake in a pair of underpants for money. Like, you know what I mean? I was like, dude, I'll do anything. And he goes, oh, well, this is like a rock guy. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. I don't know. And then I got a call just as Hay was doing The Voice, which still we didn't know what was going to come from that.
Yep.
And just before that, basically I got a call from this guy, Andrew Furs, who was working on X Factor and said, hey, look, this young kid, Reece Mastin, has won X Factor.
Okay.
It's gangbusters. How he's huge. We want you to play guitar because we know you play with Jimmy. So we want like a guitarist with cred, which, you know, I was like, I don't have any cred. But whatever. And I said, yeah, man, 100%, I'll do it, you know, and rocked up. And it was it was like Beatlemania. Like when he won.
Oh, really?
Dude, when he won X Factor, like, and I had no idea, you see, because I didn't watch the show.
Right.
And so we rocked up and we're like, and I meet him and he's this like real great kid. Like he was like, what was he, like 17 or something when he won the show? He was real young. and he was just a real good kid. Like, you know, his family had immigrated over from the UK. He was living in Adelaide. And I heard him sing, and I was like, holy shit, this dude can actually sing.
Yeah.
Like, damn, okay, all right, cool, okay, you've piqued my interest, you know. Stylistically, the music's like maybe not my total thing, you know. But then he was doing like the show. They were like, oh, yeah, so we're doing like Dream On by Aerosmith, and we're doing, you know, Guns N' Roses, and we're doing this and we're doing that, and like rock versions. I was like, oh, okay, this is like the shit that I kind of grew up with when I was like 15. Like, great, okay, cool. And man, like those first few shows, like I'd done big shows with Jimmy at that point. Like we'd done tours and like, and his audience is like wild. But
Yeah, right.
but Reece's audience at that point, like it was like Beatlemania. The first tour, the kids would scream so loud that the PA you couldn't hear. Like they screamed louder than a PA.
Wow.
Like, which today's PAs are loud. So like we had in-ears, and if you took your in-ears out, like for the first like 2 songs when he walks on stage, like you would have that thing where, you know, when it's so loud that they start shutting down.
Your eyes shake.
Yeah, it was like that. It was, and me and all the guys in the band were just like, what have we stumbled upon here? What is going on? Like, whoa. So that was like actually a really great, like for me, it saved me in a financial musical finance sense, but musically the bunch of guys were like all, you know, my age or a bit younger. And it was just a real great couple of years of touring, because we were doing these huge shows, like just being absolute hams, you know, living out our bedroom, like Guitar Hero dreams, you know.
Right.
And yeah, so I was playing guitar for that. So that was like kind of the transition of when I first started working for Jimmy, I played bass and a tiny bit of acoustic. And then I started playing guitar for him by virtue of, I think he was like, oh, they call me Jazz Boy in Jimmy's band, because he'd be like, hey, you can play guitar, right? And I'll go, yeah, sure. And so then I'm like, oh, crap, I got to play guitar. And so like we'd make albums, and he'd be like, oh, yeah, man, you play mandolin, right? And I was like, yeah, it's mandolin. I can play mandolin, sure. And so I'd be like, damn, oh, I need a left-handed mandolin. Oh, I can't get one. So I just learn upside down to play whatever the song was on mandolin, you know. And so, yeah, I ended up playing guitar in his band, and then got booked to play guitar for Reece. And then it was just like I was a guitarist, you know, like I was back to being, you know, when I was a young teenager, I just played guitar. The only person I played bass for at that point was Mahalia, because I'm the bass player in the Soulmates in her band.
Okay.
And then, yeah, just did that for 3 or 4 years. We did huge tours, like he was doing like 8,000 people in Spark Arena in Auckland and stuff like that, like it's huge, and it was really great. And then he and I bonded, and we started like talking about writing music together, and it was around that point where I was like really wanting to start like touring less and doing more production, engineering, mixing.
Were you into the production stuff at that stage though? Had you been doing a bit of it?
I've always been into it in the sense that you know, because throughout that whole period, I'd done sessions and recordings and stuff like that, and I love the process. You know, I love being in a studio, because
me too.
Playing music is killer, and when you play to an audience, it's the greatest feeling when it's vibing. But when there's that creative energy in a studio, and you're making art, it's like being a painter, but with a bunch of other people. Yep. So like everyone feels the vibe together, and when you really hit something, everyone's like, oh my God, this is the best. And it's just such a great moment of feeling, you know, and to capture that is great. And I'd always been the bass player or the guitarist in that feeling. And I'm like always looking at the producers going, oh, hey, so what are you doing? How come it sounds this good? Or why does it sound this bad? Or like, you know, I'd always want to know for my own thing, because as a musician, you want to go, hey, how did you make my bass sound so good then? Yep. So when you go to the next session, you go, hey, man, just throw the bass through a Neve and, DBX 160, man. You know, like you're acting like all cool. Oh man, this guy knows his stuff, you know. So you always do it in that way, but yeah, I just wanted to start being able to capture the art, you know, like, because that's my other dream, you know, other than playing and being a muso is, you know, I wish I could be in on the vibe when Dark Side of the Moon got recorded,
right.
or I wish I was in the band at Donny Hathaway live at the bitter end, or, you know what I mean? Like, to be immortalized.
Gotcha.
To do something that affects people long after you're gone. Mm-hmm. That's like, to me, more than fame and fortune. That's like, you know, like if, you know, 50 years from now, some kid's sitting in a room and he's real down and he's got no friends and he puts on a, you know, whatever it will be then, like he tells his mind to think about music. And then like, your brain wants to listen to this. And, and the AI says, you should listen to soul music, and like something I played came on and it affected him, and then he became a musician or a painter or a engineer. Then at the end of the day, I feel like the whole reason I'm in music has been a success, because isn't that why we do it? Yep. You know, like to make people feel and to motivate them, or so that they can feel like they're not alone in their feelings in the world. And so I wanted to get deeper than just doing that on a bass. I was like, I want to try and start doing that with the whole picture. So Reece and I started like concocting, like, maybe, hey man, like let's make an EP, let's bust out, you know, and do this. And he, at that point, he got out of his deal with Sony, and then he was like, hey man, like, do you want to produce my EP? And I was like, yeah. I've never produced an EP. Let's do it. You know, kind of like hey, can you do this? Yeah, I can do that, you know, false bravado. And so we got John Paul Fung, who's like, he's one of the best engineers, best producers in Australia. Incredible. And I'd met him because he'd done Mahalia's Volume 1 EP.
Right.
And he's worked with like everybody. Like he was working with Scott Horscroft, so he did like Birds of Tokyo.
Right.
Used to work at BJB as an in-house engineer and stuff. And so we got him on board, who's like, he's going to make you sound good no matter what. He is that good. He's like a genius. And we started producing his first EP after Sony, and we wrote a bunch of songs, and we ended up writing the first single from that was from that EP, Rebel and the Reason, that did pretty well. And I was like, man, I had such a good time in that experience. I was like, okay, I need to like find a way to do this more, like, because I was just like hooked on the feeling of it. So then we did that. Then basically he was like, can you produce my whole album? And I was like, yeah, me and JP. And he's like, no, just you. And I was like, yeah, I can do that, as I do with everything. And so then we came into this studio here, Jimmy's studio in Freight Train, because we didn't really have much of a budget. And we tracked his whole album. We went overseas on a writing trip that Millie from APRA helped us out with, and Marie Hamblian from EMI. So we went on this writing trip and wrote with a bunch of people in the US, and wrote with Chris Chaney from The Living End, and then Reece went and wrote with Diesel. And so we got all these like great people on the record, and came back to Australia and camped out in Jimmy's studio. And basically I played all the bass, most of the guitar, some keys, some string synth parts, and then we'd send the tracks to LA, and Mike Avername, who's a great drummer,
yep.
He would play, and he and I would be like Facebook messaging at like 3 a.m. He'd be like, oh man, I'm in the studio. I'm like, okay, I need it to feel like this, and I want like the snare to be like a gush, and I want the toms to be like, you know, like AMS, you know, Neve kind of reverb.
Because he totally engineers himself, doesn't he?
Yeah, and so he would basically do all the drums. I'd like build a MIDI version of what I felt like always, like, and then I'd write an email or call him, and we'd chat, and he'd fire it back. He'd do it like in the middle of the night, our time. So in the morning we'd come into the studio and open it up and be like, "Wow, yeah, all right, new drums, woo!" And that's how we made the album, flying back and forth. And then I would kind of replace bits that I didn't think felt right that I'd done on the demo, and we built up the tracks, and then we finished the record, and then we all flew over to we looked at who were going to get to mix it, because at that point I felt confident as a producer, but as a mixer I was like, oh man, this is like a whole other can of worms, and I really want Reece to have the best product, and I was like, I'll put in a mix, but let's get some other people. And so we had mix submissions, and ended up this friend of Mike Avename's, Bobby Holland, his mix we all liked the best, even me. I was like, yeah, that's way better than mine. Mine's terrible. I think my mix was so bad. I don't know what I did wrong. I did something real wrong. It sounded terrible. But so we all flew over to Nashville, and basically I got to sit in on him mixing Reece's album.
Where in Nashville?
He has a place in Berry Hill.
Okay.
What's the name of the studio? Oh man, the names escape me. It'll come back, I'm sure. I can't remember the name of the studio, but he's got this great old SSL console, and it was so cool for me because that was the first time I just sat and watched him mix, you know. Like, I'd been around before. I'd, seen Tony Buchan, who's a great bass player, and someone I looked up to as someone, he's someone who I was like, man, I wish I could be like Tony Buchan. He's a great bass player, great musician. He's been in bands. He's toured. He's transitioned to being a producer. And you've watched him, he makes great records, and works with great artists, and I'm like, man, I want to be like that, So anyway, I watched this mix process in Pentaveret. That's what it's called. Yeah, right. I knew it would come back. Nice. Pentaveret Studios in Nashville. Yeah, and basically watched him mix, and I fell in love even more because I was like the tactile on the mixing desk, and he's like, let's bring the vibe this way, and I was like, oh, this is awesome, that record got done, and then we had to do the touring cycle and all the promo of that. So, but after that, I was like even more like, okay, I got to find a way to get more into this world. And so I just started, any opportunity I could get. I was like, hey, can I come and hang out in the studio, just do some engineering? Hey, how do you do that? What do you, even more so, real nerdy. Oh, so when you patch, why do you have the compressor set like this? And why do you have...
Yep.
And then it got to a point where basically I felt confident enough that I could start saying, hey, I'd like to produce this, or I'd like to work on that. And it was really great. Yanya Boston, who's one of my dearest friends, he said, hey, I'm working with this girl, Miss Murphy, who's Karen Lee Andrews. And I was like, oh, man, she's an incredible singer. I love her voice, And he's like, yeah. We want someone to produce and mix an EP. And I was like, oh, I'd love to do it. I'm ready. I'm ready to do it. And we met up, and she said yes. Another thing where I'm just super lucky. And that was the first thing that I basically engineered, produced, mixed, and basically sent it off to mastering.
And it sounds fucking great, man.
Oh man,
well
she's
done.
Great. You know what I mean? And that's the other thing. We're so blessed in this country. That band was just so easy, so great. I did stuff, but she could sing into anything, and it would be you'd be like, damn, that chick is awesome. And so for me, it was just the best experience, because I was just they'd be out doing takes in the main room, and I'd just be lying on the floor of the control room, with my eyes closed, going, man, I'm so lucky. This is so awesome. Great. And they're like, Ben, are you there? Was it good? And I was like, oh, it was so great. A little hand would pop up. I'd hit the talk back and be like, that was awesome, And so, that was the first full beginning to end record that I did. And then I finally convinced Mahalia to let me do a Soulmates album, which was great.
Right.
actually, I finally convinced myself I could do it probably.
And that's out?
Yeah, that's Hard Expectations. Yeah, so that's the most recent one. So, and that was incredible too, just because, we've been playing together as a band in the lineup that it currently is for 10 years at least, I think, maybe.
And what's that lineup?
So it's me on bass, Franco Raggett on guitar, Dave Hibbard on drums, and Clayton and Lachlan Doley.
Okay, cool.
So, and then basically bring in a revolving cast of extras,
right?
If we can, we get Andy Bickers and Anthony Cable and Matt Keegan on the horns if we can, and obviously like Jade, Juanita, Prinnie, Darren Percival, Gary Pinto. These are all singers that if they're in town, I got the night off, we'll come and sing. Let's do the gig.
That's awesome.
And so that's kind of the core band is that rhythm section, and we were lucky enough that. Because Mahalia had been working with Joe Bonamassa, and we'd done an album as the Soulmates with Joe Bonamassa.
Here or overseas?
That was actually here.
Okay,
so we met Joe in Mahalia, and I met Joe in Amsterdam randomly because we were on holidays in Europe, and Jimmy was doing an EP and was like, oh, there's this song from your EP that I like, and I'd like to do a version of it. And we're like, sure, great. And so he recorded it, and he was working with this guy, Kevin Shirley, and who'd produced like Chisel from Last Wave of Summer. He's done like Silverchair, and, he's like one of the biggest rock producers in the world. And he goes, and Jimmy's like, oh, I'm going to go over to Amsterdam, meet Joe. We're going to track the guitar solo for this song. Do you want to come? And so Harry and I are like, yeah, all right, day trip to Amsterdam. I think we're in Rome or something, We're in Rome on a family holiday.
Awesome.
And so we flew to Amsterdam for the day. I'd never been to Amsterdam. I don't think I'd ever been to Rome either at that. So I was like, everything was like gravy for me. I was like, this is the best holiday ever. And so we flew over to Amsterdam, basically got in the cab, drove straight out to the recording studio, met Joe. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, great. Oh, you wrote this song? Yeah, we wrote this song. Oh, man, I love this song. It's great. Me and Hay are there going, oh, man, we just basically ripped this song off Betty Davis. It's like basically half Betty Davis, half Free, because they're the two bands that we love, And they're like, what? Who? Like, they're like, we know Free, but who's Betty Davis? And we're like, oh, man, you guys don't know Betty Davis? So we sent them a copy of Betty Davis, This Is It, this album that we all were obsessed with in the Soulmates, and we used to do like Betty Davis songs for years, and we left thinking nothing of it. Like, wow, it was great. It was a really great opportunity. Flew back to Italy and had our family holiday. It was really great. And then we get back, and Kevin Shirley kind of gets Mahalia's number and calls and says, man, me and Joe are obsessed with Betty Davis. Like we just both of us have just like, whoa, we want to make an album of Betty Davis songs. And Mahalia's like, okay. And he's like, what if we came to Australia and made a Betty Davis album? She's like, if you're paying, we're doing it. And he was like, yeah, no, Joe, we want to do it. And Hay was like, really? Like, we're like, okay. Because you're a bit skeptical. You're like, why would two guys like this who are just some of the best in their trade in the world want to come and work with the Soulmates, this band from Sydney, And anyway, like Joe flew out and Kevin flew out, and we came here to Jimmy's studio again, and in 4 or 5 days tracked that whole album. And that was another thing for me, watching over Kevin's shoulder.
Yeah, right.
Produce was
right.
Really awesome. And so we made that record, which then from that, Mahalia's been working with Joe Bonamassa ever since, and Jade and Juanita as well. Basically, he heard the girls and was like, these girls are amazing. And like, I want them for myself.
Yeah.
So they've been working with him ever since. And when they started touring with him, we met Kirk Fletcher, who's this other incredible blues guitarist, and one of the sweetest, kindest guys you'd ever meet. Like, he's just one of the best people in the world. And we were chatting like on this tour we were doing, and he was like, man, I'd love to come to Australia and make an album and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, like, let's do it. And then randomly some guy like hit him up and said, hey, I want you to come to Australia and do some shows. And he was like, okay. And so he booked it in, and then we were like, okay, let's make an album with Kirk when he comes. Okay, great. So we booked a few gigs in Cairns. I don't know why, because I think that we got offered some gigs. So let's go to Cairns.
Yeah.
And we went up there and just jammed a bunch of like Soulmates tunes and some stuff we'd been working on and writing. Did 2 shows up there. And then we came back to Sydney and made the Hard Expectations album. So I engineered and played bass on all of that and produced it and mixed that with Kirk Fletcher playing guitar on all of it, which was great. And put that out. And then snowballing from that, started engineering, being the engineer of this studio in Jimmy's house, because I was just in here so much.
Yeah, you know the stuff.
That then I ended up engineering and playing bass on Jimmy's latest album, Criminal Record.
Yep.
And now I'm here doing stuff with Chisel.
Right.
And I'm so lucky.
Man, that's awesome. So is this studio also hired out for other people to come and use? Not much,
Not really. Like, every now and then, like, I know, like, Case Chambers has been through here, but it's more like Jimmy's so busy and everything Jimmy's associated with.
Sure.
And then also now Mahalia and myself, and, like, we did Karen Lee Andrews' album here, which was great. But yeah, he's in here so much. Like,
yep,
we're working. Like, that's when we only finished tracking, because we did it in like kind of gaps between touring for Jimmy's album.
Sure.
And we'd finished that and turned that around in like a month or 2 from the last tracking sessions. Then since then we've been, the Chisel guys have been working on stuff, and it's just kind of always in use, which is a great thing. But I guess as a musician, there's always something going on, So yeah, it's kind of like it's private, but and friends, you know what I mean?
Totally.
It's the dream studio, which I'm trying to do, the same thing at my house in the Highlands. So.
Oh, great, awesome. So you're building something. Oh, I saw something on your Instagram.
Yeah.
Some renovations.
Yeah, I love debt, so I went to the bank and said, "Hey, I'm a musician."
Yeah,
and they went, "Great.
Yeah,
what can we have when it fails?" I'm trying to basically build a studio to really push further on what we were talking about before, where I want to be able, if I hear someone that I love or a voice or a musician, and go, "Hey, I know you got no money. Come. Let's do a single or something. Awesome. I can do it in a couple of days. I love what you do. Take this product. Go,
Man, that's fantastic.
Well,
that's so cool.
Obviously, like, I need to financially make it viable. So, like, I'm going to, like, if someone can pay, like, I'm like, yes, please.
Of course.
But the main aim of it, like, in an ideal world, was that I can be comfortable enough working, touring and recording, that if there's someone who's a friend or someone that I hear that's so great but doesn't have that opportunity, I can do something to help, because those little, it doesn't seem like much at the time, but those little leg ups really change people's lives, For me as a musician, like Darren Percival saying, "Hey man, come to Sydney and do a show." I was like, "Oh man, yeah, I'd love that." And he was true to his word. He came up. They weren't the greatest gigs in the world. I was playing at like Establishment and Marble Bar. When you live in Sydney, you're like, "Oh, I've got to gig at Establishment and Marble Bar." But for me, like that, when I got those gigs, I thought I had fucking made it.
Yeah.
I thought I was like top of the hill, and that changed my life. Those tiny moments of like, it's not a big deal for him, but, I owe him the life I live now, really, because without him bringing me up, I wouldn't have met Jade, wouldn't have met Mahalia.
Sure.
And so I want to try and pay it forward, as a musician. That's the great dream. Like, when you meet your idols and they're nice to you, or you meet someone that you respect and they, it might just be like a, "Hey man, you're doing great." But then that kid might go and be the next Jimmy Page or Phil Spector. Well, hopefully not Phil Spector, but, like...
the old
and
Phil
then I got a gun.
No, shut that chick. Oh, man.
But you know what I mean? Like, hopefully, and that's the community thing of music, I think we forget sometimes.
Yep.
Is how important it is, not to be a downer, but like we're losing too many of our friends, you know, because it's hard. It's really hard, this life. And so I think it's even more important, just the way the world's going for music. It's not getting any easier. The money's getting less, not more. The opportunities are harder to come by. So if you're in a position to do some help or some good, you know, I think you kind of, you have to, you know, if we want to keep this incredible music scene that we have here. Like, you know, looking at, you know, my wife's working with arguably one of the best, biggest blues guitarists in the world. You know, like she's from Australia. You know, she's a chick that, like, her dad's like Jimmy Barnes, but man, I met her. She was doing gigs at the Fringe. She was doing gigs at the Civic. She was doing the slog like the rest of us, you know. And, you know, Jade, incredible singer. And so these people, like Joe, Reece, who was in Stevie Ray Vaughan's band, they go, man, you Australians are great. You know, we are. There's some of the best musicians in the world in this tiny country. You know, so we got to like help each other out, you know, because, you know, we don't get enough help from the government or, you know, there's just
no grants and stuff.
No,
like that.
Well, no, you know, like, you know, for what we give to the world as artists, not just musicians, like painters, film people. Man, the percentage rate of like people that are good from Australia is pretty high, I reckon. You know, in New Zealand it's the same. But New Zealand has a good community of helping artists, you know, too. And that's you know, if I was bigger, you know, had more sway, I'd definitely be trying to advocate for helping, especially the mental health thing, like Support Act, stuff like that. It's so important. And so you might not be able to like give money, but as a musician or an artist, if you can give time, then, you know, that's just as valuable to musicians. You know?
So I want to do a episode on mental health.
Oh man, in the music industry, like, you know,
it was actually Ian Jones's idea. Do you know Ian Jones?
Yeah, Jonesy.
It was Jonesy's idea.
Yeah,
because we chatted a while back, and he suggested it.
It's important. Like for me, you know, my father-in-law is Jimmy Barnes. You know, like he's like a iconic rock star of Australia. You know, he's the working class man. Blah blah blah. But then, like, we've just done these working class boy and working class man tours where he's just talked about publicly things that unfortunately so many people in the world have gone through. And that's the thing, like, I'm so proud of him in that, to have the courage to be who you are, like who he is, you know, and then just come out and go, yeah, well, I'm this guy, but actually this happened to me. I feel like this. You know, I've never really felt grateful for my life until very recently, because I just had all this shit going on and all this shit from my past. And the amount of help that he's given people just from telling the truth of his life and his story, when you're someone who's that big, like, I'm like, man, he's a hero. You know what I mean? Like, to musicians, because we all like listen to his story and go, oh shit, you know? Damn, you know. But what he's done is definitely like cracked that thing that a lot of musos have, where we just don't talk about that stuff. And like, to have one of the, if not the biggest singer in Australia go, yeah, I got issues and I'm happy to talk about them. That's powerful, you know. It's like breaking down that, like, you know, masculine bravado thing that a lot of guys have, you know. And as musicians, we need to, we talk with our instruments, we talk with our art, but that mental health thing, sometimes you just got to talk.
Man, absolutely.
And that's real important. And as I get older, that stuff is really important in the making of the music. You know, like, you got to get to the heart of what it is. And sometimes to get to the heart of the music, it's got nothing to do with music. You know what I mean? Like,
100%.
You know, as a musician, as just an instrument player, as I learn more about just being a good man, I get better at I'm more of a good musician, you know, because that stuff, it comes out of you. It's, you know, music, when you play guitar, there's something, you're feeling that G chord that you're playing, you know?
Right.
Like, or, you know, when you hit that snare, that's a feeling, you know what I mean? Like, and the true greats are the guys that, like, when they just hit a snare, you go, oh, damn. You know, like, and that's because it's coming from somewhere. And that's the thing with, like, great singers like Jimmy, like, when you hear his story, you go, that's where that voice comes from. That's where he's singing, like, you're like, damn. Okay.
I'm just thinking about the situation you're in these last few weeks, having Chisel in here.
Oh.
Not just Jimmy, but all of those guys.
Man, oh, man.
Like, you're just sitting here watching them all. You're like...
watching the art happen.
Mossy and...
Oh, man. And the thing that's great...
Charlie Drayton?
Charlie Drayton, yeah.
Fuck,
yeah.
man.
Oh, man.
Man.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure recording him.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's I mean, these guys, like...
I got some stories, man, collectively.
Totally, and just, like, seeing how they work, too. Like, they're all such different people. So different. They're like, you know, they're like family, like, you know, where you love your brother, but there's something he does that really annoys you. So you're just like, oh, dude. But then in those moments when you're like a family and the huddle happens and you're on, like, basically when you're on the stage, it's like, we're the family. And, like, there's some magic when these guys get to, like, I've been lucky enough to see them, and I was really, really blessed to, like, you know, I did some stuff with Steve before he passed.
I was going to ask you about Steve, yeah.
Yeah, and, like, you know, we did some writing many, many years ago, and then I went and saw a Chisel gig at the Clovelly Bowls Club before they did, I think it was like they played at the V8s or something, and so it was the band with Steve. And just, like, seeing Chisel in a bowls club, like, like back in the day, it was just the best. Like, man, like the vibe, that they were just so tight. They're all like about to, like, fall into each other because there's just so little room on the stage, and you could tell that they were like, oh, get out of my way. You're too loud. You're too loud.
Yeah, right.
Fuck, it was the best. It was just, like, the coolest vibe, you know, and recently I got the opportunity. I'd never seen Midnight Oil live either, right? And they were doing a gig at the Greenpeace warehouse just down the road, like in from where we are in Alexandria or something. And same thing, this tiny room. There was like maybe 300 people, and they're just like plowing through just hit after hit. And I like Midnight Oil, but I didn't get it, right? Because I just, as a kid, I listened to it and was like, yeah, that's cool. You know, and then when you see Peter Garrett on stage and the band just, like, going for it, like the guitars just sound incredible, I was just like, oh, man. Like,
Rob Hurst just...
oh, dude.
Rob
like,
Hurst doing Rob Hurst.
That snare, man. Like, yeah, I know. That's what I mean. Like, and you go, I get it now. I get it. Right. I get it. You know, like... Like those moments are the coolest, because when you're in that contained small environment with that much energy, musical energy, you know, artistic energy, it's just like it's like a wall hitting you. Like that gig was incredible too. Like man, his drum sounds are just killing too.
Yeah.
Like that's my studio obsession at the moment, is like the coolest drum sounds I can get.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I'm like, I love nerding out on like, oh, yeah, so I saw this guy uses a mic here to get this sound, and how do you tune your drums to make it sound like that? And like, oh, how do I get this? Oh, T-tails. Oh, okay. You know, I'm like really obsessed with... Do you have that that license to experiment a little bit with Chisel? Or it's pretty much, we kind of know... I just don't... You know, some things...
You just don't need to.
Nah. Man, Charlie, dude, like, that's what I mean. Like, he'll just like... You know, I'll be sitting here getting ready to do a take, and then I look up and he's like, I'm ready. And then he hits the snare. I was like, what did you do to the snare? Whoa, that's amazing. Like, and he's so musical. That's what I love about Charlie, is that, like, you know, he just plays music.
Yep.
He doesn't play drums. He plays music. And that's cool. It's a bit of that Ringo thing, you know what I mean? Like Ringo can't do a drum solo, but man, he can play a song. And Charlie's a bit like that too, where you know he can play, you know he's got chops, but like just the way where he hits the snare and where he like kind of swings the hi-hats, all that kind of stuff for me, sitting in here in the studio, I'm just like, oh man, when they all leave, you know, and I'm like just doing a little rough mix at the end of the day, I'm just like solo the drums and I'm like, listen to that shh-pa. I'm like, oh, that just feels so good. Oh man, I just want to take that home and just jam to it, you know. And like so that's what I mean. Like every day, and that's what's so great about being in the studio. On the good days, you're just like, how did I end up here doing this, listening to that? That is awesome, you know. But man, Charlie is killer.
Yeah, man.
Oh.
Yeah. We're talking about all these positives in the studio. What are some of the biggest challenges in a recording studio?
Something I learnt from watching Kevin Shirley is that it's actually so little about the technical. When technical things happen, that's a downer, obviously. Like sometimes, you know, something will break and you're like, oh, okay, Pro Tools isn't working.
Right.
Coffee break for an hour. Oh, okay, no, Pro Tools isn't coming back. You know, like those things are bad. But from Kevin, one of the most important things I learned about being a producer is got nothing to do with any of the gear in this studio. It's just to do with like just being aware of the vibe and just knowing, you know, knowing when to joke, knowing when like, hey guys, let's just go and have a coffee. Like, let's just go outside, making a joke or something. You're knowing when to pull back and push, and that's the real. When something goes wrong in the studio, it's usually a vibe thing. Like if people are a bit tired and the take's not working, and I've been guilty of it. It's
just knowing when to stop flogging the dead horse.
Totally, and that's something I learned. Like we were doing a session with Kevin, and he was like, "Yep, okay, next song." And we're like, "Oh, but we haven't got to take it." And he goes, "Yeah, next song."
Okay.
And we're all a bit like, "Oh, man, you know, like talking amongst us, like, just whatever, man, you know, I thought that was fine. Yeah, man, you were great. Yeah, you were great too. You know, like, you know, as musicians do when you're the musician. Yeah, no, I thought I was fine. You know, went to do the next song, smashed it because he sensed that we, you know, he'd like fired us up a little bit, and he goes, yeah, that was perfect. One take. Let's go back to the other song. And we're like, oh, we nailed that in one take. Guys, yeah, we're awesome. I told you we're awesome. Yeah, okay, do the song back. And then we like nailed it. And that's a skill. That is an art. Like just knowing how to wrangle 5, 6, 10 personalities. You know what I mean? That's the real key. That's the other thing I'm obsessed with. My nerd side is like drum sounds. But then on a more esoteric level, it's like understanding how to just be welcoming in the environment and just catering to get the best thing to happen. You know what I mean? Like, because that's the idea. And that's where like Kevin's great. He pulls killer drum sounds, you know, like his mix vibe stuff is like, he's great. Like his rock mixes are just killing. But in the studio, it's nothing to do with the technical. Like his whole thing that I admire is whatever it takes to catch that lightning in the bottle of the take, you know, like get that drum take. So you, from that first downbeat, you feel energy, you know, and that's the true hard thing about being a producer in a studio, you know, and when it goes wrong is when you can't get that vibe. That's when it's like drawing blood from a stone. That's when it's hard work, you know, like if someone just doesn't want to be there from the outset and it's all down vibes, that's hard. You know what I mean? That's the bad studio moment.
I guess to be able to develop that skill well, you need the technical thing down, eh?
Yeah,
Because, you know, you could be trying to up the vibe, but if you can't get somebody or...
Well, that's
you can't get a good sound. That might be half the problem, eh?
Yeah, like headphones for musicians.
Yeah.
Headphone sends. That is the bane of many.
Oh right, okay.
Oh man, like if I was going to say there was one thing that could kill a vibe in a studio, it's a bad headphone mix for musicians. As a producer, like I spend a lot of time trying to make sure that the headphone mix is vibing. Which, in a way, is like you got to make sure that, like, when you pull the drum sounds, you want the drums to sound good with nothing on them. You want to run them into the preamp, and you hear them go boom, ka, and you're like, that sounds nice, sweet. Anything we add from there is just going to be gravy. And then you send that to the headphones, and if they're there and they put the headphones on, they've had their coffee, you sit down and they go boom, pa, and they go, ooh, you've won. You've won the battle.
Awesome.
Whereas if you put your headphones on and it's like. And it's like, oh, and they're like, oh man, I said these headphones are terrible. Yeah. Oh man, the jack's wiggly and it's like cutting in and out. Oh, and then you can just see their vibe is like, boom, you know.
Yeah.
And I've been guilty of having a tantrum in a studio over headphones before when I was like, back in the day, I was like, man, I can't work like this. This is like, how am I meant to play like with any feeling when it's just like, that's what it sounds like in the headphones. So that is very important. To me, I think, you know, because it's just like, then you're giving the musicians, you know, you're asking them to like play for you. So you kind of got to make it so they sound nice to themselves, you know. So yeah, that is the one technical thing that I'd say you really got to get across is that. Like, because when you think about the other aspects of it, if you're recording a punk band, they'll probably think it's hip if you just use one microphone.
Yeah, right.
Guys, I'm going to use this $50 microphone that I got from J-Car.
Yeah.
And we're going to make the whole album with that. And if they're a like punk rock band, they'll be like, man, this is awesome. But if you're someone else, they'll walk in and go, you're fired, you know? Like, so you kind of need to like know when you got to be technical and when you just got to not, you know? Like a funny story is like one of the first times I engineered for Kevin Shirley, I set up something like 20 microphones on the drum kit because I'm like, top and bottom of the tom, you know, 2 on the kick, two rooms, 1 mono room, stereo overhead, you know, like I just went to town. And he walks in and he just starts moving microphones away from the drum kit. I was like, oh, did I not put them in the right spot? And he goes, yeah, they should be back in the cupboard, man. And I was like, oh shit, okay, sorry, you know, but. That was a cool lesson. He was like, well, what do we need this for? That's what this is. That's just doing more of this. And then I just got to phase line this with that and then do this. And then that, what even is that? You know, like, because I'd set up, there's a microphone I love that's called the worst mic for drums, right? Where it's like basically I saw it online, some guy in Germany. I love it. But basically you set this SM57 up, like pointing at your knee.
Yep.
And you have it just over the lip of the kick drum. So the capsule's like kind of like you looking down at the kick.
Yep.
And then you like just smash it through a compressor or something. And you know what I mean? It's like the coolest sounding mic. I love it.
Yeah.
It's really nasty and it doesn't work for most things, but oh man, I love it.
Yeah.
But that's the
So you use that instead of like sending like a parallel send to a compressor?
Yeah, like I do it when I'm mixing. I do a bit of sidechain compression. Like I'll send, like if I'm doing something, usually I'll send the kick and snare at the very least. I'll bust them out and have like I do most of my mixing in the box because I just don't have.
Yep.
Haven't won Lotto yet, but yeah, I'll bust them out to like a Neve compressor or something, and just kind of like just to get a bit of that, you know, glue vibe happening. But now I'm really trying to commit on the way in a bit more, like because I think that's one thing as you get to be more confident.
Yeah, you want to get it right at the source.
Yeah, like so I'll go, okay, I know this studio pretty well, so I'll compress something a little bit. Very rarely do I overcompress anything going in because compression is one of those things where if you overdo it,
There's no coming back.
No one's going to be happy with you.
Yeah.
But things like I'll use EQ a lot more bravely than I used to, because I'm like, no, man, I want that kick to have some bottom end. I want to see the speakers freak out. So I'm just going to like put like, 60 hertz on the pool tech and just crank it. So it's like, boom. And so in here, everyone's like, whoa, dude, you're going to blow up the speakers. I'm like, I hope I blow up the speaker, but like I'm trying to commit to more of that.
Yep.
Because that's the other thing, like having that faith, like catching that vibe, and once again, it depends on what you're doing. Like this, like with Mahalia's album, and it's the Soulmates. It's a band. They're all my mates, so they trusted me. I trusted them, so I could take a few chances. And there's a few things on there that I screwed up, but it's okay.
That's cool.
Like we made it work. We're like, it's all right. I'll just replace it later. I'll fix that, or we'll do this. Yeah, no worries. And with Karen's album, she was really great. She had a lot of faith in me to just do my thing, and so. Obviously, Yanya, I love recording Yanya as a drummer, because when he's in the studio, he's so conscientious. Like, he's like, oh, what do you need? I was like, I'd like it to be like this, So basically the drum sounds on that, he got, I think it was his, like, what was it? Like a Sonor, like the little pearloid.
The vintage.
Yeah, the vintage soul.
Yep.
It was one of those guys.
Yeah, man.
And we got the big fat snare thing on the snare pretty much for the whole album sessions.
Yep.
Which that's one of the coolest things ever. I love that. Yeah, and so basically I said to him what I wanted, and he was like, yeah, man, I can do that. Do you want me to hit harder, softer? And it's such a joy to work with people like that, And so that was the thing with that recording. I was like, great, I know how you're going to touch the drums, perfect. And so I could just like drive the preamp so that way it just has this the drums sound real fat, and that's not really anything to do with me. That's just like Yanya played perfect, and then on, say, the Soulmates album with Dave Hibbard, I love Dave. He's probably one of I'd say in the world, I would say he's probably one of the drummers I love to record with or would ever want to. Like, if I had an opportunity to say, who would you love to record on drums? I'd be like, I'm already recording Dave Hibbard. You know what I mean? Like, because just the way he thinks about drums in a recording process is incredible. When he thinks like that on a live gig, it's more stressful. But, hang on, I just got to change the snare and the hats and this cymbal as well. No.
After each song.
Sometimes.
Oh, really?
Man, sometimes.
Oh, right. Live?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. It drives us mad, but he's right, like it's not, I swear, every gig we do that's like a bigger gig, most of the time people come and say, man, the drums sounded killer. Because he just knows what sounds good for what song. And so on the Soulmates album, if you listen to Hard Expectations, like all the drum sounds, they change pretty drastically throughout the whole album. And that's Dave going, no, wait. I'm like, oh, okay. And he goes, puts this ride cymbal on, he just hits it. And I'm like, oh. And he goes, is that better? I'm like, man, it sounds, by the end I was like, Dave, I can't really tell the difference, Dave. I love you, but I don't know. I've got to run back out and play bass on this. I still don't know the song. Can we just hurry up? But, when it came to mixing it, I was like, man, you pissed me off, Dave, but damn, thank you so much. Because,
yeah, right.
The drum sounds he gets are just killer. So for vintage stuff.
So he's looking at the big picture when he...
100%.
Yeah,
like sonically. And for that vintage stuff, But then was a T, Warren Trout, for like probably one of my other favourite drummers in the world. Just like his touch on the drums is incredible. Like the when he hits a tom, there's just a resonance to it that's just like, I haven't really heard anyone else get, in Australia, you know what I mean? Just hit the drum with that, just the way he hits the drum, I'm just like, damn, man. He's an incredible drummer for like just like laying that stuff down. Like I'm just like, oh, this is awesome, you know.
And again, that's about knowing your drums as well. Because,
Totally.
I mean, as you may know about, you know, say for example a tom, you know, depending on the type of wood or the heads, if you hit it too hard, it chokes.
Totally.
You know, or if you don't hit it hard
and that's
enough,
what I mean. It's like he like whips the drums. I'm always like watching him, like going, man, he's like whipping that thing, like. And it's true, like, because they sing with him, like, and I've been lucky enough to record. Obviously, he played on half of Jimmy's latest album along with Jackie.
Oh, did he? Okay, right.
Yeah. So what was it? Was it played? Oh, yeah, I think it was about 50-50 split of Jackie and Warren, because Jackie was out on tour with Lockie Dolly Trio and Rose Tattoo, I think, for a bunch of the album process. So Woz would come in and I'd recorded Woz before I got Woz to play drums on the first Reece Mastin EP that I did.
Okay.
Because I was like, man, I can call Warren. As a producer, I was like, yes, all right. Woo! Yeah, man, he's like the other, sonically so far removed from, say, Dave, but just that heavy touch. Like, it's funky, it swings. Like, he's got a great swing, but he rocks. And that's like just so fun to play to as a bass player.
Right.
But also to record and it's much like Charlie, like they have this swing to them when they play, even if you're playing a straight feel.
Yeah, I got you.
Like, you just feel like that something's swinging and you're like, what is it? I don't know what it is, but it feels great, you know? Yeah, so it's real. I'm real lucky that I get to, and as a musician, like, you know, that's the thing, like doing this, that makes me better as a bass player because I get to listen to that all day. So I'm like, woo! And I can analyze it. Like when I'm mixing that stuff later, I listen and go, oh, that's what he's doing. Okay, cool. So then when I go to do the next thing, I'm like, hey man, like, can we try doing this with the hi-hats? And they go, oh yeah, cool. And I'm like, yeah. Because sometimes, like, you know, especially with drums, like if you leave an eighth note out on a hi-hat on a beat, like you just go, can you halve the hi-hat? And then all of a sudden that song is just the coolest
that's right.
feel ever.
Completely different.
And that's the other thing for being in the studio that I think really helps musicians is you play and you're like, man, that was killer. And then you come in and you listen and you're like, whoa, there's about 4 million too many notes there, you know? And that's the other thing that from being in the studio I've learned is to just shut up and play less, which, you know, something can still learn because I overplay all the time. I get carried away. Yeah. I get too carried away.
Yeah. But. Yeah. What's one bit of gear that you wish you had in here?
Oh, in the studio?
Yeah, man.
Oh, it depends on the day.
So this is mostly digital, yeah?
No.
I mean, apart from you.
Yeah, basically all in this studio, it's kind of, there's not like a old school console.
Yep.
But we've got all the outboard like preamps,
yep.
like, 8 Vintech Neve copies, a couple of Neve 1073 copies.
API.
Some Burley API, Chandlers, a bunch of great compressors.
Yep.
So it's...
Oh, I heard you say DBX 160 there. They are.
Yeah, there they are down the bottom.
Yeah. And I love a distressor, man.
Yeah, man, the distressors. Yeah, that's killer. The thing I'm probably the thing I love the most in the studio is that there's a stereo 1176 down there.
Yep.
And when I'm doing like a big tracking session, I just put the drums through it and just all buttons in.
Yeah. And
in this, the drum room here is just, when you get the mic placement right, it's just the coolest thing. It's like, you know, John Bonham would have loved it here.
Yeah.
You know, that's what
I'm
like, man, he would have been like, this drum room sounds awesome.
Yeah.
But in terms of a piece of gear I wish I had, look, I you know, it's a big piece of gear, but I would love like to be able to just mix on like an old SSL or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like I was lucky. I went and did a thing with Kevin Shirley. He does this thing called Mix with Caveman, where basically you can go and hang out at his studio in Manly, or he's got a studio in Malibu, and you go and basically mix a track on his desk, and he'll, you know, he talks about his process and what he does, and I was real lucky that he invited me down to do it, and And it was actually just before I started mixing Mahalia's album, the Hard Expectations album. So I was like, great, I'll take one of the tracks that we recorded. So I'm like, cool, this is perfect. And basically you get to mix it on his he's got like a modern one, an SSL, I think it's a Duality console. And just the tactile, it was like you're playing an instrument. And for me, that was just so fun. Like, I loved it. Like, because the one downside of just the cost problem, but is that a
lot of work.
Well,
a lot of upkeep.
A lot of upkeep, but then when you're just not with that stuff, you're just in a computer all the time. So you can really get carried away editing and like chopping and crossfading and doing this and like that waveform's like that's maybe digital, just I don't know, which is cool. Like if you're doing like modern stuff, it's got to be super clean, it's got to be super tight. But I've been lucky that I'm lucky that most of the stuff I get to do is not super clean and super tight, because I'd probably be in OCD hell. Just like, I can still hear a pop or a crackle here.
Yeah. But
you get real stuck in the computer sometimes, and that's a bit hard. So the dream for me would be to have, an SSLE series would be great, or just some kind of like killer analog console. So like when it's mix time, you just turn the music on, get up off your chair, start dancing to the track and mix the track.
Yeah.
And that's
Isn't it? It's Jack White doesn't have a computer screen in his studio.
Oh, yeah, man. Yeah. Well, like in the studio here, we made a choice to move the screen so it's to the side, so it's not in the center of the monitors.
Right. Is that where it used to be?
Yeah, basically it used to be there, but then we just thought, then when you're mixing, because we've got this little, it's a C24, it's like basically just like a controller for Pro Tools, but
okay,
you can do levels and panning and stuff on it. So basically what I'll do now is I'll set up like any plugins that I like. So I'll put some like Fairchilds and stuff on things, or a bunch of Pool Techs on the drums and 1176 on the drums. So I'll set up my little things that I do all the time, a few EQs, just do some real basic housekeeping. And then I like to, in this studio, just like, zero the board and just turn it up loud and just kind of get a bit of a party mix vibe going. Because then instantly you're like, oh, man, this is fun. And you just start getting into the tune and whatever. And then, like, you can maybe go and have a cup of tea and then come back and get more detailed with the, like, okay, oh, no, I've panned too. I should pan this over. Oh, that's better panned over here. Oh, yeah, let's do. Oh, and then you do all the automation rides and whatever. But that's what I mean. The dream of old school mixing, where it's like, you know, you're a musician, as much as the band. Like you're just there on the mixing desk and like who's the one, the incredible famous old like dub. Oh, what's it? Lee Scratch Perry. Like he's famous. He would ride that mixing desk like an instrument. Brah, 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 all that stuff. Those dudes that they do gigs like that with the desk, and that they basically ride the song and like create another song out of this like basis that the band played. And that's the dream. So if anyone wants to like loan me $250,000 for an SSL, I'll mix your album for free.
Your kids musical at all?
Yes. Yes, unfortunately, yes. My eldest is a really great singer. Like,
oh, awesome.
From a real young age, she
good pedigree.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I sing, but I don't say that publicly because I know who my family is. She, on the other hand, doesn't care. No, she's a great singer from a real young age. Like, I remember we were driving and she must have been like 3 or 4. And she was like really obsessed with When the War Is Over, the Chisel tune. And we're like, oh, you like this? And she said, I love it. And we're like, okay, sing this part. She sang, and then Hayes started singing a harmony above. And then I was like, okay, you stay on your note. And I sang the harmony below and just nailed it. And so then, foolishly, we're creating a monster, I know, but she was like, hey, if I get that part right, can I come and sing? And we're like, yeah, sure. And she must have been like 4 or something. And anyway, that we're doing that song in the set. She walks out with the microphone, spotlight goes on her. Everyone goes, oh! And she's just like, you could just see that thing in the kid. They're like, oh, yeah. I'm the shit. You know? Like, you know, I was like, oh, no. Oh, no. And it was weird because she was like real and like real confident. And then had this little period where she got a little like, oh, I don't know, yeah. Always sings though, like constantly. Yeah. And Mahalia says that if the music is after 1974, odds are she's not going to like it unless it's Prince. So Ruby is like our eldest is likes pop. So it's look, it is a little funny, but she'll just constantly be singing like Post Malone or whatever, and Mahalia's just like, oh god, this is the worst. She just won't stop singing it, you know. And I'm equally to blame because I've got this thing where I'll try and be even more on the like pulse of what musically something's happening. So I'll get out there and like go, I got my horses in the back. And she's like, oh, Dad. And then she won't sing that song anymore. And so if I get out in front, right, she'll be like, oh, Dad sang that first. Okay, you know. So, but then she'll find something else. Right. Like she'll be like, oh, yeah, what about the Jonas Brothers? And I was like, I don't know that one. She's like, yeah. And then she'll sing that for 2 weeks straight.
And then you'll learn it.
Yeah, and then I'm just walking around singing, oh, my sucker. But yeah, no, she's great. And she's 9 now. And the other night, Mahalia had a gig at the Camelot Lounge in Marrickville. And we're driving down because she's like, hey, Mum, it's a public holiday. I never get to come to gigs anymore. Can I come? And we're like, yeah, you can come to the gig, sure. So we're on the way down, driving from the Southern Highlands. It's like an hour and a half drive. And she starts singing along with the songs from the Hard Expectations album because obviously she heard it constantly while I was mixing it at home because I just did it in my study when we mixed the album. Mm-hmm. And she starts singing and she's like, hey, you know, if I learn the parts, could I do like a song or two? And we're like, oh, yeah, sure, okay, you know, well let's try it. And so we put the album on, and Mahalia's singing, and I sing a harmony part, and she's like, where should I sing? And we're like, well, you sing this part, you sing the top parts because they're the easiest to hear. She starts singing, and we're like, okay, that's good, yeah, that's actually really good, because she's like, I know this song, Dad, and I'm like, yeah, I know you know the song, but it's, you know, stop being a smarty pants. Anyway, in the hour and a half drive, it went from one song to basically she ended up singing on the whole gig, doing BVs for the whole gig, basically.
Oh, wow.
And so the girls, Juanita and Jade, were doing it, and they rocked up late. So they only had like 10 minutes to rehearse together with Ruby, our eldest, but they just got up and did the gig. Oh, man, and as the gig went on, she just got more and more confident, and we were doing like Natural Woman, Aretha Franklin, and it was really cute. But she just like was like, you make me, just belting like in the whole bandstand. We're all just like, damn, Ruby, sorry, woo, you know. So yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. She's really talented. The youngest one is probably going to be a drummer. Cool. She's obsessed with drums.
Yep.
So
and you're telling me before she's wild.
Yeah. She may be a good singer, but she's not like Ruby could sing in tune straight away. Like we'd put on Sesame Street when she was like 2, and there'd be that Gladys Knight ABC, which is just awesome. And she would sing along, you know, like in key, like, and you're like, oh, okay. Whereas Rosie just screams. So you're like, okay. She's starting to try and like sing more now, but she is obsessed with drums. She loves it.
That's great.
And she's funny because she got up on basically having a birthday party, for I think it was Jimmy's birthday or something, and he invited some friends over, and a lot of the time it descends into a jam, and so a bunch of the guys from the Wiggles were there, who Rosie's obsessed with. And so they're playing. They have this Irish band that they do. And I think they end up just playing some tunes. And Rosie gets up and just picks up a tambourine. And everyone's like, oh, yay. But then Rosie's like standing there, front center, like full rock stance like a grandfather, just hitting the tambourine.
In time?
In time. And everyone's like, whoa, oh, man. and then I think it was like, I think Diesel was playing guitar, and she turns to him and she goes, play louder. Full dictating the band, and we're like, oh, man. This one's the band leader. Ruby's the backing vocalist in the band. But, yeah, no, the kids, Ruby's definitely. Rosie, we'll see what she wants to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. What's the rest of the year got?
Well, basically, I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm. And how much more of this?
I think we're done for now. The guys are just still writing. So,
okay, cool.
like this week that I'm in, and then I'm going out on tour in Europe with Jimmy in July.
Okay, cool.
We're doing a bunch of shows. We're doing like Wembley, supporting ZZ Top and a bunch of festivals.
Oh, wow.
Yes, that'll be cool. And then we get back from that, hang out with the fam for a little while, which is good, and then go and do a gig with Jimmy in the Maldives.
You poor thing.
I know, it's hard. You know?
You okay?
Yeah, that's the best gig, man. Like,
oh, wow.
And so we go and
That's like a corporate...
No, it's like
right.
this thing, like a surf... We did it last year.
Okay.
And basically it's called Surf Music in Paradise. And so they put on these surfing holidays with bands.
Oh, right.
And it's cool. Like, and they asked Jimmy, and we didn't do it the first year, but they're like, you got to come. And they're like, hey, we want you to do it, Mahalia. And so we're like, all right, we'll do it. But we have to bring Franco, Mahalia's guitarist, because he's the only person in the band that surfs. And we're going to the Maldives, and we're at Kanduma, and apparently it's this killing wave. So Franco was like, oh, this is the best. And so we went and did it. And I had a crack at surfing. Mate, I thought I died so many times in those big waves. But,
as a surfer, you're a good bass player.
That's right. I'm incredible. And so we're doing it again this year. So we do that in September, do a gig in Singapore on the way back, land from Singapore, go straight into rehearsals, do Jimmy's album tour September through to November, December, I think. Mm. And then, yeah, I'm not sure. It's plans. Mahalia will be out with Joe, so then I'll just be at home with the kids. And
wow, man, it's full on.
It is. It's full on, but like the cool thing is that like sometimes it's hard, because being that I'm a musician and Mahalia's a musician and we both tour, it's hard because like this last year we've been separated from each other a fair bit because she tours with Joe and then she'll get back and then I'll have to say do this for 2 weeks, so then I don't really see the fam that much. But when you're not working, you're just 24/7 with the family, and that's the other cool thing about this job for me is even when you're like, oh, I've got no gigs, I've got nothing happening, when you have a family, it's pretty great because you're like, I got nothing on, so I'm just hanging out with my kids and playing all day and like, gardening or doing some mundane stuff, but it's actually really fun, so even when you're not busy, it's great. So that's awesome. But yeah, this year is crazy busy.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. All right, Ben. Man, really dig your vibe.
Oh, thanks,
Such a positive, happy dude.
Oh, some days.
Yeah. Enjoying your life.
Oh, man. We're all pretty lucky here. Mm. It's like,
I feel lucky. Like being here, man. Like sitting in this room. It's awesome. Man. Awesome.
I know, it's great. It's great. And that's what I mean. It's just building life, I think, is about good vibes.
Yeah.
And we all have bad days.
Of course.
I have lots. But it's just trying to keep in mind, Mahalia said to me like many years ago, it's like, I want you to wake up. And when I say, how are you? You say, good. Because if that's the first thing you say in the morning, then it's all up from there. You know what I mean? And I think...
It's bloody hard, though.
It's real hard, but as musicians and artists, that joyous feeling is only as far away as your instrument is. And that's the thing to remember.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which is, we have an outlet for our emotions.
Yeah.
You know, whereas an accountant probably can't, like,
Yeah.
feeling real down, I might do some tax.
Might do some algebra.
Yeah.
might dig out the old abacus.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Maybe they do feel joy doing that. I don't know.
I don't know.
If you're an accountant, hit us up.
Yeah, each to their own.
DM us and let us know the joy you get from accounting. Because musicians, we sure could use it. An accountant that finds joy.
Wicked. All right, Ben Rodgers. Thanks so much, bro.
Thank you so much, man.
No worries, man.
Thanks.
All
Cheers.
Right, see you, bro.
Bye.